This is by far the craziest and most terrifying thing I have ever experienced, and I've gone back and forth on whether I want to share it or not because I know how it's going to sound. But it's something that has deeply bothered me for a long time, and I'm hoping it'll be cathartic to put it down into words. I was driving on a major highway with my very young daughter in the car at night. We were on our way home from visiting my mom and doing about 65 miles an hour in the right lane. Shortly after a large truck passed us at probably 85, the road opened up and I just happened to notice this cluster of what I thought were stars in the sky at about the halfway point in my windshield. As soon as I saw them, I noticed they were moving and not at all in a normal way. I think there were 6 or 7 points of light in the beginning, but they were moving in and out of a tight group, and every time they would separate, the number would change. They would break apart into 3, then go back together and break apart again into 6 or 8 or any other random number. I found myself intensely focused on this, and since the traffic had thinned out, I didn't have to concentrate so much on the road. I didn't know what I was seeing, but the main thing I remember is not being able to tell if they were way up high in the sky like actual stars, or if they were closer like above the highway a mile away. It was very strange optically, and it absolutely looked like a deliberate pattern. I had only been watching for about the length of a TV commercial when I started to feel concerningly tired. It came on almost instantly, and I had to make myself move around in the seat so I didn't fall asleep, which was really scary. As I was debating whether or not to pull over or get off the highway at the next exit, this intense feeling came over me of mentally being pulled outside of my own body. I tried as hard as I could to fight it, and I even tried to pull the car over, but before I could do anything, my vision went to this view where I was watching myself driving down the road. It was as if I was looking at my car from another car in the left lane. I could see myself sitting behind the wheel as the car was still flying down the highway at full speed, and I knew my daughter was right there in the back seat with me, but I felt completely separated from it physically, and there was absolutely nothing I could do. That's what made the experience so terrifying, because I was still aware of what was happening and I understood the danger we were in. I knew that at any second the car could drift off into the shoulder or hit another vehicle and crash, but I could not control any part of what was happening. I was mentally screaming at myself to hit the brakes or pull the car over, and I felt like I couldn't even protect my own daughter, who I could still see through the back window. It's so difficult to put this feeling into words because it wasn't just fear. It was a level of helplessness that I have never felt before, like watching a natural disaster unfolding but knowing you have zero power against Mother Nature to do anything about it. I don't really know how long this lasted because time didn't feel the same as it normally does, but somewhere in the middle of my intense panic, I somehow came back into my body and could see my hands on the wheel again from my own perspective. We thankfully hadn't hit another vehicle or gone off the road, but I was so deeply disturbed by this experience that I took the very next exit and parked in a random Target parking lot. That night, I called my husband, told him exactly what had happened, and waited for him to drive out to us so I could follow him back home. I didn't know what happened, but it truly shook me to my core. After this event, I of course worried about my physical and mental health, and I went back and forth about going in for a medical check, but I never ended up doing it. My husband's best guess was that I was so tired and comfortable that this experience happened in a split second as I was falling asleep, but then I caught it and woke up. I am open to that explanation and even other ones, like maybe it was an extreme form of zoning out or possibly a kind of highway hypnosis. But I also think I already know those feelings, and this wasn't the same. I felt like I was literally outside of the car and I could see myself behind the wheel and driving. This wasn't like a dream, I actually saw that. As if this couldn't get any more disturbing, about 24 hours after my experience on the highway, the weirdest things started happening. The first time was when I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I remember opening my eyes and rubbing them for a second, and as soon as I pulled my hands away from my face, I saw these bright lines that looked like text or symbols. They were completely unrecognizable to me, but they had that look to them. I'll try to describe this so it makes sense. When I say I could see these lines, it was almost identical to when you look at something bright, then close your eyes and you can still see the bright thing for a few seconds. It was just like that, but I could see them faintly with my eyes open and really clearly with my eyes closed. When my eyes were open, it looked like they were floating in the room right in front of me, but then when I would close my eyes, they were bright against the black, so I could see them perfectly. The lines themselves looked just like text though, or individual characters, but they weren't any language I would recognize. In addition to that, they were in a vertical orientation, so it seemed to be something you would look at from top to bottom. This is really hard to explain, so I hope that gives you a basic idea of what I'm talking about. This phenomenon of seeing the lines happened to me probably 10 times over the course of a few days, and it was at random. They were always exactly the same characters, but I would see them in my room and in the kitchen or at the store. It wasn't something that only happened when I woke up or did a specific thing. Each time I would see them, they would just show up in my vision. Then if I closed my eyes, I could get a better picture, but it would fade after 20 to 30 seconds and I'd be back to normal. This made me go down rabbit holes online about eye diseases and brain tumors and all kinds of things I thought were wrong with me, especially after the incident on the highway. But it only lasted about 3 days and it's never happened since. My life went back to normal after this short string of weirdness, but I've never been able to figure out what it was. I have since had a regular checkup with my doctor, but was too embarrassed and scared to mention it. And I've also had an eye appointment to get the prescription for my contacts updated, and there was nothing out of the ordinary there either. There's only one other person on Earth that knows about this, and it's my husband. I've wanted to talk about it more, but I always end up avoiding it because it's just too weird and I don't want people to judge me. I really don't want the people around me to know about the episode in the car when my daughter was with me. This is basically my whole story, and I still don't know what caused it all to happen within that single week. The only thing I can think of is that it started the second I saw that cluster of small lights ahead of us on the highway. But that doesn't make sense because it's not like we were the only car on some back road. This was a major 4-lane highway with plenty of cars going in both directions. So my biggest question is, why did this happen to me? I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, but I'm originally from a small town in Oregon called Damascus that's about 30 minutes outside of Portland. In 1991, I was turning 12 years old and my mom planned a birthday party for me at a popular skating rink not too far from us called Skate World. It was a big deal to her because it was my last year before the word teen was in my age, so she let me invite a large group of friends. Everyone was meeting us at the skating rink except for my best friend Joel, who lived next to us, and he rode in our car because his mom was helping my mom manage the party that day. When it was time to go, the 4 of us got into my mom's new at the time Nissan Maxima with her driving, Joel's mom up front in the passenger seat, then Joel and I in the back seat. We had about a 15-minute drive on mostly back roads to get there because Skate World was in a neighboring town called Gresham, but I remember this drive very clearly despite my age because of what happened. A few minutes after we left the house, my mom cracked her window and lit up a cigarette, which was a normal thing back then. I always hated the smell of it in the car though, so I cracked mine open too, then leaned over and did the same on Joel's side. When I did that, I got a quick glance out the back window and saw part of something actually above our car. The way I remember it is that I thought there was a giant magnifying glass or curved lens above us that was floating at about the height of the lower power lines, and it was just following us as we drove down the road. I could only see part of it through the rear window when I looked up, but the reason I say it was like a magnifying glass is because I could see right through the middle of it. The edge, on the other hand, was distorting the sky, so if it weren't for that edge, it would have been totally invisible. I pointed it out to Joel, who saw it instantly. Then we started shouting at our moms like little kids, saying there was a spaceship above the car. I was still turned around and looking out the back window, but my mom completely ignored me. At the same time, Joel was trying to get his mom's attention, and both of them were dead quiet in the front seats. When I turned back to face her, I leaned up and was hitting her arm because I thought she couldn't hear me. Then I distinctly remember seeing the cigarette fall out of her fingers and onto the floor because of my hitting. She never acknowledged me or the burning cigarette that was somewhere on the carpet at her feet. They were both sitting like zombies and not even talking to each other. At that point, I yelled "Mom" as loudly as I could, and she finally turned her head to look at me. I will always remember her expression because it looked vacant, like she had no idea what was going on for a second. Then the only thing I said to her was that her cigarette was burning on the floor and she pulled the car over in a hurry. I'm pretty sure this moment was only a few seconds long. It just feels longer in my memory, like it was in slow motion. I thought I was going to be in a huge amount of trouble for knocking it out of her hand. After we stopped and she dealt with the cigarette on the floor, Joel and I were bouncing out of our seats trying to tell them about the thing above our car, but when everyone started looking, there was nothing out any of the windows. Whatever we had been seeing was gone, and it really made us look like liars. I don't know if it just kept going down the road or flew off in a different direction after we pulled over, because our attention had been on the cigarette situation. And I should mention that my mom never said a word about it falling on the floor. I don't think she even knew I was hitting her arm. Joel and I spent the rest of the drive swearing we were telling the truth and describing this clear glass spaceship we saw because that's what we thought it was. But we might as well have told them it was a pink elephant because neither one of them believed a word of what we were saying. At 12 years old, you move past things pretty quickly, especially when it's something you can't fully understand, and that's exactly what happened that day. We got to the party probably 10 minutes after getting back on the road, and I don't remember spending much more time thinking about what had happened. My friends were all there and we skated and opened gifts, and it was probably the best birthday I've ever had. I really didn't start to question anything until I got older. I must have been in my late teens when I finally said something to my mom about it. She says I am wrong and none of what I remember actually happened. I was told that Joel and I imagined the entire thing because we were kids and we were overly excited about the party. Her view on this has never changed. She refuses to believe what we experienced and doesn't even remember the incident with the cigarette. In her mind, we just drove to the skating rink and nothing else happened. We just had a birthday party. As I got even older, it continued to confuse me because of what I remembered. Joel and I also stayed friends for a long time, and we always had the same story. We both saw this transparent object above the car, and we both remember that moment of trying to get our moms to listen to us when they wouldn't. His mom thinks the same thing mine does, that nothing happened on our way to the skating rink. This might sound like two kids imagining things when they were young and thinking it was real, but I can tell you I'm almost positive that's not the case. Neither Joel nor I had any interest in that kind of thing back then. We were heavily into sports, and specifically the Blazers at that time because they made it into the finals the very next year. Aliens and close encounters weren't even on our radar. There's one more small piece of what I consider to be evidence, and that was when we sold my mom's car years later. I know for a fact that my dad bought new floor mats before he put it up for sale because it had a big cigarette burn on the driver's side mat. I know that could have been from any other time since she always smoked in the car, but I only remember there being the one single burn on that mat, and I was the one who helped my dad clean the whole thing before we sold it. In all honesty, I don't know what happened on our way to the party, and I won't pretend that I do. I know I was only 12 years old, but Joel and I both remember it. We saw something above our car, and our moms were completely unresponsive for a short period of time while it was there. And one last thing. Incredibly, I still have my hand-drawn birthday invitation from that party. This is what my mom photocopied for me to hand out to all my friends, and I've sent along a photo of it. I have hung on to this invitation since the party because it was such a memorable birthday, and every time I look at this, it reminds me of what happened. In 1995, I was working for a local fruit farm in central Pennsylvania that is still in operation today. Specifically, this orchard is on the outskirts of Montoursville, which is a suburb of Williamsport, a smaller city of about 30,000 people. At the time, I had been working there for a few years and actually helped the owner, who was a very good man with high standards, plant the first block of various apple trees. Now it has become a very successful 100-plus acre farm. During pruning season, he and I would be side by side going through rows and rows of apple and peach trees, and that involved looking up a lot, so it was very common for us to see commercial jets and even smaller planes flying at different altitudes over the farm. We always assumed there was a jet stream or some kind of flight path highway that happened to be over that specific location. On this particular day, we were up on the hilltop section of his farm that had a wide expanse of view. It was a beautiful blue sky day and just an enjoyable place to be working. Then we saw something really out of the ordinary flying overhead, and it appeared to be a couple of military fighter jets. There was one in the lead and another one following. Then, approximately the length of a football field behind the second jet was something I have never seen before, and I always have a hard time describing it. There was a gray or possibly silver ball about the same size as the jets, and it appeared to be almost bouncing in the air behind them. The owner of the farm and I had no idea what it was, and we were completely confused by this. As it continued to pass over, we could see this object was in fact the shape of a large gray ball, and as we got a better view of it, we could see spots of a very bright silverish color. I'm not sure if these were actually spots on the ball itself or if they were just small reflections from the sun, but it's something we could see from a fairly significant distance. I think the most striking part was the size though. Picture a ball or a metal sphere nearly the size of a fighter jet flying through the air. It was a pretty incredible thing to see, and on top of that it was following the two jets with this bouncing motion going up and down behind the pilot in the back. The two jets were in a perfectly tight and staggered formation. Then this object following was farther behind, but it looked exactly like it was either part of the formation or chasing after them. We watched all three of them go across the sky until they were eventually out of our view, and we were left standing there clueless about what we had just seen. After the fact, we also realized that we hadn't even heard the slightest noise coming from the jets or the unknown object. However, they were at a high altitude. But still, you'd think we would have at least heard the engines of the jets, which we didn't. After this unbelievable and completely unexpected sighting, the farmer, who was a very reserved, logical, and no-nonsense person, kept mostly quiet about what had happened for the rest of the day. That was a little shocking to me. I, on the other hand, rambled on and on with curiosity, questions, and wonder at what it could have been. I really couldn't stop talking about it. When our workday was over, the farmer pulled me aside and told me very sternly not to go around town telling everyone we had seen some kind of UFO at his orchard, and he was being dead serious. I think he had that reaction because he was a very respected man in our small community, and he didn't want any spots on his reputation. I understood where he was coming from, but couldn't imagine just forgetting about it like that. Even after he had asked me not to, I still couldn't keep it to myself, and I told anyone who would listen. I even went as far as making calls to our small local airport to ask about weather balloons or test flights or any other odd things that might have been in the air or shown up on their radar that day. Unfortunately, that got me nowhere. They hadn't seen anything and had no information about what we saw. Years after this, I told the story to a friend of mine, and he suggested that the rear jet could have possibly been towing something, but the farmer and I hadn't seen any kind of tether, and the object didn't act like it was being towed. I guess I wouldn't totally rule that out, but what we saw really looked like it was chasing the jets and moving under its own power. I have also seen videos of jets and larger planes refueling in mid-air during flights, and I can confidently say that is not what was happening. I also think it's incredible that this happened in the middle of the day. It wasn't like other sightings where people will see a strange light in the night sky. Not that those are any less interesting, but there was really no confusion. This was a real nuts and bolts object flying right behind two very real military jets in broad daylight. More than anything, I would love an explanation for what we saw over 30 years ago, because I think about it all the time and it still amazes me. I wish smartphones had been around back in '95, because I would have definitely filmed the entire thing. But I am still grateful I got to witness it firsthand though, even if it confuses me just as much today as it did back then. I haven't spoken with the owner of the farm in years, so maybe he would think differently and be more open about it these days, especially since the UFO/UAP subject is much more accepted and mainstream now. It's also far less ridiculed than it was back then, and I think that's a good thing. It really affected my life afterward, and I've never had a problem talking about it with anyone. It also made me look up more than I ever would have otherwise.